Hi there, David. Thanks ever so much for agreeing to spend a bit of time with us today. David Micklem, you're a writer and theatre producer, former joint artistic director at Battersea Arts Centre, and sometimes you work with us at People Make It Work as a consultant. How are you?
Hello, thanks for the chance to say hello this afternoon, a sunny afternoon here in Brixton. I'm very well, thank you. Keeping safe and well, staying at home, doing the right thing. And I suppose I'm concerned, as one might expect, for members of my family and for members of my community. And I'm concerned for the economy, and I'm concerned for the arts and cultural sector and all those things. But I also have to confess my dirty secret, perhaps, to being excited by the kind of prospect of some of the changes that we're seeing. And maybe in our chat, we'll cover some of that ground too. But I've got a degree of tigrishness today about what the future might hold, sort of short, medium and long term.
Great. Well, that feels like a nice balance. Do you have any thoughts then about kind of how the cultural sector could be responding to the current situation?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this over the last couple of weeks, and as you know, talking to a number of cultural organisations, representatives, chief execs and leaders of cultural organisations. And I suppose one of the things that I'm reflecting is we're in a period of incredible and fast moving change. And I suppose what's helped me to think about that change is to chunk it up a bit, to think about the next 18 months in maybe 3 separate phases. So I might talk a bit about that, and feel free to interrupt. But I guess if I think about the 3 phases, you might describe phase 1 right now, the phase we're in, as being kind of short-term, fast planning in order to kind of get our arts and cultural organisations into a position where they can maintain some kind of momentum going forward. And that might mean furloughing staff, that might mean rapidly changing business model. So that's phase 1. I'll talk a bit about that in a minute. Phase 2 is kind of perhaps from middle of April onwards, maybe for 3 months or 6 months or 9 months, who knows, but is a kind of new normal where we're all having to self-isolate. We're working from home, many of us, and many of our arts and cultural institutions are kind of shutting up their literal shop and are thinking about how they operate in a new world. So that's phase 2, and I'll talk a bit about that in a moment. And then phase 3 is kind of out the other side, whenever that might be. And I guess I'm having some really encouraging conversations with cultural leaders at the moment about trying to maintain that perspective, to be thinking about actually what might the world be like in 18 months' time when we all emerge, blinking from our caves into the light. What might we want our arts and cultural institutions to be like? And I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment too. So 3 phases: an immediate phase, which might last 3 or 4 weeks now, a second phase, which might be 6 or 9 or 12 months when we're kind of bedding into a new normal, and a third phase, which is kind of, a bright new future. So I suppose, what I'm observing in this first phase is that many organisations are being brilliantly supported by their principal stakeholders, and I'm feeling very encouraged by that, and by our colleagues at Arts Council England, who are, I think, doing an exemplary job of making people feel supported and understood in these very difficult times. So I'm observing many organisations really spending the last 2-3 weeks just thinking about how they get their kind of shop ticking over in what you might describe as kind of low power mode. What's the kind of minimum operating model that those organisations might operate in? And I think it's really right and proper that many of those arts and cultural institutions in that phase perhaps aren't giving too much thought to phases 2 or 3, that actually right now there's an immediate looking after people, looking after staff process that people need to get to. And while some arts and cultural organisations, I think, have brilliantly stepped into the fray and said, right, we're moving all of our content online, we're going to become, exemplary sharers through digital media of our content. I think there's some great examples of that. I suppose I'm also observing some arts and cultural institutions rightly holding back a bit from doing that. And I think understandably and rightly feeling like they have permission just to take some time. And I'm really encouraged that some of our cultural leaders are using this period not just to kind of get their house in order, but also not to rush to kind of be the first cab off the rank and take territory, but actually thinking, let's just see how things bed down, which I guess then moves us into phase 2, which is kind of the new normal, and this notion that we're all going to be working from home for the foreseeable future. And as I say, I think there are some arts and culture institutions that have, you know, rightly and quickly opened up their vaults and said, look, it's all up for grabs. Who wants to have a look at what we've done? But I don't think that's for everyone. And I think we're still really in the foothills of this crisis and in the foothills of what a new normal might look like. So where I'm having those conversations with arts leaders, I'm really encouraging people to feel like they have permission just to spend a bit of time reflecting, crucially on listening to their stakeholders, no, not feeling like they should have all the answers to how to deal with a crisis of this magnitude, and that they have stakeholders who will have some really brilliant ideas over time to contribute to what they might do in the longer term future. And that's okay. It's okay, I think, right now not to know what might be next, and not to know where you might put some energy and some focus, and that there's a discomfort in that, and that it's all right to sit in the discomfort for a while. That from that discomfort probably comes the beginnings of some new solutions. And I suppose the other thing that I feel is that those organisations that are really perhaps beginning to show their potential in this new phase 2, as I'm seeing it, are those that are really aligning their plans to their core vision, mission and values. That those organisations who are sort of exemplifying their core purpose through a new digital means are those that I think are really being noticed by the wider population, by people who regularly engage in arts and cultural activity. And I'm really encouraged by that. And I guess if I was talking to other arts and cultural leaders right now, I might be saying to them, you know, if you're struggling to think about what you might do next, or what you might do in a very changed world, then go back to those kind of core principles. Perhaps refresh those core principles with your senior management team, with your staff, with your stakeholders. Get a really strong sense of why you do it, what you do, and how. And then think about how that wider sense of core purpose might be deployed in a world where we're all working from home, where we're all isolating at home. And then on to phase 3, I guess I'm feeling encouraged by those arts organisations that, again, yes, they're dealing with the immediate crisis, and I'm not underestimating the emotional and physical response that people are having to the crisis. And, you know, we're certainly at the very beginning of it. And I also think it's great that arts organisations, some, are thinking about the longer term. And I'm feeling very encouraged by, I talked earlier about my tigrishness, my enthusiasm for this current moment that we're in, that many arts and culture institutions are feeling that there's a real opportunity to be grabbed here. I don't mean that in the sense that there's territory to be taken, but there's an opportunity to kind of break out of models, ways of working, ways of thinking, ways of engaging that perhaps didn't feel quite right beforehand, that were kind of, there was a received wisdom about how you might do things, and many of us were engaged in that received wisdom. And I think a crisis of this magnitude gives us all a chance to kind of really radically think, not just about changing 10% of what it is we do, but 50% of what we do. And that's often a very useful thought experiment in normal times for an arts organisation, to think radically about what it might do differently. So I think the graunching of the wheels, the kind of the stick in the spoke, might be a really good opportunity for us all just to have some time, brilliantly supported by Arts Council England for those of us that are funded as MPOs, to really reflect on what it is we do, why we do it and how we do it, in order that we can think about how we then might emerge in a very different world in 18 months' time, to take the best of what we've done before, but to make it different for a new and hopefully exciting new world that we re-emerge into. So is a long-winded rant on what I think about the current crisis and how I'm seeing some really, some emerging green shoots of, I think, quite exciting new thinking from amongst our portfolio.
And what are you sort of noticing in terms of what patterns do you think are emerging beyond that kind of three-phase model that you've described? What have you seen people doing that, kind of is worth noting?
Yeah, I'm trying not to use pejorative terms here, but I'm noticing what I might call invaders and reflectors. So invaders are the folk, and I'm not mentioning any names here at all, but the folk who've kind of gone, okay, we're going to take some territory here. We're having to stop doing the thing that we used to do, which meant that people came together and sat in a room and engaged with something at the same time. So we're going to quickly move to take some territory and establish ourselves as the provider of X or Y or Z. And then I'm also noticing at the other end of that spectrum, the reflectors, the people who are kind of not quite claiming yet what it is that they're going to be doing and want more time to talk to their stakeholders and to talk to their staff and to talk to their artists. And I suppose what I'm noticing or reflecting on is the fact that we need both of those kinds of approaches in this moment. We need the quick folk who are, first off the starting blocks and are doing, I think, some really interesting and innovative, new projects to engage folk. But I also think it's good that many arts organisations are not yet declaring their hands and are spending a bit more time really thinking robustly about what it is that they want to jump forward with. And I suppose connected to that is just some concerns that I have. One is that, self-isolating, working from home doesn't equal digital or online for everyone, that many of the communities that we want to engage with as arts professionals don't have super fast broadband or don't have their own method of getting online because they're sharing a laptop with or an iPad with a family, or they don't have super fast broadband, or maybe they don't have any access to the internet at all. So I think in the race for territory to kind of go and move digital, whilst there's plenty to be said that's positive for that, I suppose one of the concerns I have is that it does amplify some of the social inequalities that already exist in this country and around the world. And I suppose a second thing that I'm noticing and perhaps fearful of, if I'm presenting a slightly less tigerish view of the world, is that, and I'm guilty of this myself, over the last couple of weeks since we've been self-isolating, I found that the conversations have been more than ever between ourselves. So if I think about the kind of echo chamber that we all tend to occupy, I wonder whether the lockdown has reinforced some of those echo chambers. And certainly, the Zoom beer I'll be having at 6 o'clock this evening is likely to be with an even more sort of homogenous group of like-minded folk than it would if I went to the pub and bumped into somebody I haven't seen for 20 years, but we have a chat. And so I'm worried that the sort of, the curated Zoom conversations, which I'm really enjoying, whether they be professional or personal, are just sort of reinforcing that sense of it's the same group of people talking to themselves. And that actually, if we want to kind of really open ourselves up as arts and cultural people, as artists, as 64 million artists, then I think we need to find new ways of engaging people beyond the Zoom link or the house party offer. That and I suppose the caveat to that is last night, along with hundreds of thousands, probably millions of us last night, 8 o'clock, went out to our streets and clapped, and I waved at people I've never seen before who live literally over the road from me. And so that's not an online experience, that's not a digital experience, that's a real world experience. And I guess it was just, might sound flippant me saying it, but it's a fairly energizing reminder of the value of face-to-face connection. And even though we were at least 2 meters away from each other, it was great to say hello to neighbours who don't look and sound like me and aren't of the same age group or economic background as me. And I'm so eager to kind of find new ways of connecting them. And I think there's something about this crisis and the sense of us reverting to a sense of kind of community that again fills me full of excitement and enthusiasm for the future.
Thank you, David. It's a really, really brilliant to spend some time with you and to see the world from your, through your eyes, and notice the things that you're seeing, and think about the ways in which they might reflect our own experience too. So I really like that 3-stage process that you described, those phases. That seems really helpful, and I think it's super helpful to remind us of the ways in which this current situation might exacerbate some of the inequalities that we've all been concerned about for some time. So thank you so much for spending time with us today, and look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.